Safe harbor. The Star of Faith was supposed to be a passage to freedom. It was meant to carry hopes across the sea for families like Samir, Laila, and their 11-year-old daughter Hana. For this small family, leaving Syria was one of the hardest decisions they'd ever made. But the war had left them no choice. They boarded the ship with little more than their dreams. Samir dreamed of finding steady work as an electrician. Laila longed for a safe place to raise Hana, and Hana, she simply wanted to go to school, make friends, and laugh again. As the ship traveled, the family watched the sun set each night, feeling both hopeful and afraid. Then, just miles from the Isle of Man, the ship's engine failed. Now they were stranded, floating in sight of land yet so far from setting foot on it. The sea, which had once seemed full of promise, had become a trap. They waited and hoped that someone on shore would see them. The people of Peel, a small harbor town on the Isle of Man, were the first to respond. Local fishermen and volunteers set off to reach the stranded vessel, bringing blankets, food, and warm clothes. At the docks, people gathered, waiting to help however they could. Among them was Margaret, a retired nurse known in town for her kindness and generosity. When asked if she could house a family, she didn't hesitate. "I have a spare room," Margaret said with a smile. And that's how Samir, Laila, and Hana found themselves in a warm, cozy home, with a real bed and a hot meal waiting for them. Hana looked around in awe, touching the quilt Margaret had placed on her bed. For the first time in days, she felt warm and safe. For Samir, though, it was hard to accept help. His pride made it difficult, even though he knew he had to. That first night, Laila, sensing his unease, whispered as they lay in bed, "This is just the first step, one step at a time." She squeezed his hand in the darkness, reminding him that they were still together and that they'd made it this far. The next morning, Margaret took them to the community center, where people were busy helping the new arrivals. There were stacks of clothes, boxes of food, and volunteers arranging temporary accommodations. Hana stayed close to her mother, unsure but curious. Samir spoke a little English, enough to introduce himself and thank the people around him. Laila knew only a few words, and Hana even fewer. But despite the language barrier, everyone they met smiled and welcomed them, easing some of their fear. Their new lives quickly settled into a mix of routines and adjustments. Margaret's home was filled with strange objects, from a ticking grandfather clock to a collection of seashells on the windowsill. Samir, wanting to help, fixed small things around the house, loose hinges, squeaky doors, and even a broken faucet. Each small repair helped him feel a little more useful. Laila, determined to learn English, joined a knitting circle at the community center. There, other women taught her simple words and phrases. They laughed at her mistakes, but always encouraged her to keep trying. Each week, Laila brought home new words to practice with Samir and Hana. The knitting circle became a place of comfort, a bridge to the world around her, and a source of friendship in an otherwise lonely time. For Hana, adjusting was difficult. School was challenging, and at first, she felt very alone. But her teacher, Mrs. Wilson, paired her with Lucy, a kind girl with a big smile. One afternoon during recess, Lucy taught Hana to play hopscotch. They couldn't talk much, but they laughed together. Later, Hana taught Lucy a clapping game from Syria, tapping out the rhythm on her lap. The melody floated through the air, and for a moment, Hana felt at home. Back at Margaret's house, their family began to fall into a rhythm. Samir spent his days searching for work, but it was harder than he'd hoped. Most local electricians already had businesses, and though he offered his skills at reduced rates, the work was scarce. Still, he kept himself busy, helping around the community center with repairs and maintenance. His quiet dedication didn't go unnoticed. Soon, a local handyman named Dave offered Samir a few days' work assisting with projects around town. Dave was a big, friendly man with a thick accent that Samir struggled to understand. They mostly communicated with gestures and a few shared words. But as they worked together, Samir began to feel useful again. By the end of each day, he came home tired but content, a small piece of his pride restored. Laila also found purpose through her cooking. As her English improved, she began volunteering at the community center, cooking meals for both refugees and locals. She shared recipes from Syria, introducing people to the spices and flavors of her homeland. One evening, she made fattoush and kibbeh, and invited Margaret and her knitting circle friends to join them. As the smell of spices filled the kitchen, Laila felt proud. She was sharing a piece of her culture, and for the first time, she felt truly welcomed. For Hana, the months brought both growth and challenges. With Lucy's help, she learned more English, practicing phrases at home around the dinner table. Her confidence grew with each small victory. A quiz she passed, a compliment from her teacher, a new friend at recess. Bit by bit, she began to feel like she belonged. As winter approached, Margaret gifted Hana a woolen scarf and gloves, hand-knit by the women in the knitting circle. The family was also invited to a town Christmas gathering. Though they didn't celebrate Christmas themselves, they were touched by the warmth of the event. Hana marveled at the twinkling lights and the festive music, and for a moment, the hardships of their journey faded away. During the gathering, Hana decorated gingerbread cookies with Lucy and other children. They smeared icing on their hands, giggling together. Watching Hana, Samir, and Laila felt hope swell in their hearts. As they walked back to Margaret's house that night, Samir wrapped an arm around Laila, whispering, "We're finding our place here." But there were still days of homesickness, sharp and painful. On the anniversary of their departure, Samir and Laila prepared a traditional Syrian meal to honor their roots. They invited Margaret and a few close friends, sharing stories of their life in Syria, the beauty of their homeland before the war, and the family they'd left behind. As they ate, they felt a bittersweet sense of connection, a reminder that they could carry their culture with them, even in a new place. As months passed, Samir found steady work with an electrical company. His skills were finally recognized, and he was valued for his work. Laila continued her cooking classes at the community center, where she taught not only refugees, but locals as well. Her classes became a place of laughter, learning, and friendship, a way for her to share her culture with her new community. In time, they even organized a cultural event at the community center to showcase Syrian traditions. There was music, dance, and food. Islanders and refugees alike gathered, enjoying the lively performances and delicious dishes. By the end of the night, laughter and music spilled out onto the quiet streets of Peel. For Samir, Laila, and Hana, the Isle of Man had become more than just a temporary refuge. It had become a place of healing, a community that had offered them safety, kindness, and a chance to rebuild. Though there were still days when they missed home deeply, they had found something beautiful here, a new beginning. And so, with each passing day, they continued to hold on to their culture while embracing the warmth of their new home. Hana taught her friends Syrian games, Laila shared her recipes, and Samir told stories of their homeland. They had woven their lives into the fabric of the island, and their story became part of the island's own, a reminder of the power of kindness, resilience, and the universal search for a place to call home.